I'm going to make some cups from slabs. To do this, I will be using a truncated cone template. This particular template is made out of an acetate plastic. You can download templates like these that you can customize the dimensions off from templatemaker.nl and other template maker sites. So this is just a truncated cone, which I will be altering to make the shape that I want. I have a few simple tools, of course a scoring tool, I have a brush for slip, I have a wooden tool for pressing seams and getting into small areas, a knife, and I have some, this is just a cork with some chamois so that I can address the lip and edges, one of my favorite mud tool sponges, and a mud tool silicone rib. These are just my favorites. You can use anything that works in a similar manner. So then beyond that, I've got to have my trusty surgical towel for my hands and a sponge, which is slightly damp, and then a container of water. Let's get started. I got my slab. I rolled mine on my North Star Porter roller, slab roller, but you could stretch your slabs, you can paddle it, you can roll it with a rolling pin, or you can use notched slats with a wire tool. But the thickness that I have is a little more than 1/8 of an inch. And it's a little bit thicker than what I would like for my finished product, but I will be doing some altering, so this will work perfectly. The clay that I'm using is a Cone 6 black porcelain called Black Ice from the Spanish company SIO2 in Barcelona. So that is what I'm using. You'll notice I move my slab by picking up the duck fabric that it's on, as opposed to picking up the slab itself. I want to handle it as minimally as possible. The first thing that I'm going to do is take my rib tool and have it be just a little damp, not dripping wet, but damp. And I'm going to compress the slab. I'm also going to remove any unwanted marks that have occurred from the slab making process. Again, whether you're stretching it, rolling it with a rolling pin, or a slab roller. So I'm applying just a little bit of pressure, and I'm holding the tool almost flat, like at this at this sort of a degree, very, very flat. And I'm using the round side of the tool so that I don't create any unwanted gouges or marks. Now this will be the inside of my cups. So I like to have a texture on the inside of my cups. And the way that I do that is I take some sort of material or fabric and I press it onto this side of the slab and I leave it there while I'm working. So I have this fabric here. It's pretty cool. It's got this glittery effect to it, and it looks sort of ethereal, like clouds or waves, and that really works with my intended concept for my pieces. So I'm just going to lay this over my slab. I'm not pressing it in with my hands. Instead, that's a job for my rib. Once again, I'm going to just start in one place and press the material. I kind of like how it undulates and it's not necessarily completely taut. Sometimes it's a little more lifted than others, and that's just fine. Again, this is going to be the inside of the piece. And this is just a feature that I like in my work. So I've really not pressed it down very far because, again, this will be the underside while I'm working. And so while I'm working, that will compress the texture in further. So the next thing that I'm going to do is flip this slab over, and to do that, I'm going to take the rest of my duck fabric and cover this side of the slab. Also, drawing paper or cotton rag paper, newsprint, that will also work. I just happen to have this duck material and it's all the same piece. And so I just fold it over, and then I'm going to use another large board to support the slab. So I'll take another board and I just set it on top. And then I can flip the slab manually. A little bit out of frame, but I think it'll work. And then I take off my initial board that I was working on. And now the entire slab has been flipped over. And I carefully pull back my duck fabric to reveal my work surface once again. But this time the fabric is underneath the slab. So that's perfect for me, and I'm ready to get started compressing and removing the texture from this side. So I clean my rib and make it damp again, and then I'm going to once again remove this texture. I do it in all directions to make sure that it is pressed. I'm now ready to start pressing in textures to create the concept behind my pieces. If I take my template and I rest it anywhere on here, I can see that I can get 2 cups out of this. I wouldn't try to push it and get 3 because I do need material for the foot as well. So I'll probably compose something like this and this to get my 2 cups. And the reason that's important for me is because I like to start my composition with a subject. And so my subject of choice, I will be using these little figure stamps that I've made from relief carvings that I've done. And this starts my composition. So I will choose one face and I will compose it somewhere on the slab. These are made out of plaster that I poured over some relief carvings. So I know that that will fit onto my cup. And then my next one will go somewhere here. And I'd like to create something a little bit different. So I'll do the opposite. Okay. And so now I'm going to have a little bit of fun composing this. Porcelain takes texture very easily, so it doesn't require much mispressing to get marks that I don't want. But if I work too hard to remove the unwanted marks, then the piece will start to look overworked, and so I have to walk a very fine line when I do any kind of adjustments or corrections. Most of what I use in my compositions are found objects. The game pieces are things that we found in the attic and basement of our antique home in Midtown. We also find interesting pieces from the family business, the machine shop, and I look at how they can contribute to the conceptual aspect of my work and how they can relate to one another in a narrative manner. Also using found objects from travels, especially abandoned or items reserved for the trash or refuse. And I do like aspects of the pieces to relate to one another. So even though they may have different motifs, there will be parts that unify them as a set or a whole. Sometimes the most common objects can make the most intriguing marks. If you have a curiosity about them, take the time to explore. And you may be pleasantly surprised. Altering existing tools is another consideration. This tool right here was a wooden rib that has been ground to make a stitch pattern. All right, now that I have a composition, I will take a look at my templates and figure out how I would like to have the design relate to the form. When I'm cutting through, I set my template down and I'm just very lightly dragging my tool, which is clean and damp, through the clay, because I don't want to cut my fabric, but I also want to make sure that my cut is precise. I'm going to overcut. It's a good idea to make sure to hold your template firm, even though I know this is sticking onto the clay. Now this excess clay will become the foots of my cups, and I'm just going to use a simple pastry cutter for the foot. I like a little scalloped edge, and based off from my template, when I form my template, I can see roughly the size that that foot will be, and so I can choose my pastry cutter so that it's a little bit larger than what I need. Now, for me, instead of keeping this flat, I'm actually going to set it inside of a bisque mold so that this can support the clay and I don't have to touch it with my hands because I don't want to get fingerprints all over it. I could also just set it aside on a piece of newspaper if you don't have something like this. It's a very light touch so as not to disturb. And that will probably be okay. All right, so now I'm ready to remove my excess clay so that I can start to reclaim it and I can use it to make handles. You'll notice I'm touching the slabs as little as possible. Looks like perhaps my cut did not go all the way through here. So I'm going to start where I know that it released and just follow my line. So I'm going to take all this extra clay and I'm actually going to take the time to reclaim it. All the clay wedged, and now we'll store it away. Now I will adjust the lip. I like to have an undulating lip on my cups, and so I will use a clean and damp tool to cut what I would like. I try not to make it too regular so it's not predictable. And I'm also thinking of how both ends of the cup will attach to one another, and I'd like them to be at the same height for that purpose. Again, note I'm doing everything I can to avoid touching the clay. I like to work in small sets. Normally I do sets of 3 to 5 at a time from a slab or from multiple slabs that I'll be working on at the same time so that I have some continuity and consistency in a run. And now I will address the lip. I'm going to slightly damp my fingers so I can first tap down the top edge. If the lip of the piece is too harsh and sharp, it won't have a nice finished quality to it and it won't be comfortable to use. Then I like to use my chamois. It's just slightly damp, and I just run it over the edge to a dress so that it's got a nice finish to it and there's less work to do after it's assembled. And now I'm going to bevel the sides. So I'm going to undercut this at a bevel going under the slab. And now to remove that, I'm going to pick up the material and see if I can get it to separate. And then I will just slightly press this inward so that that clape isn't too thin. And now because I cut this one under, I'm going to cut this one over. Always keep my tool clean and damp. And now I will cut. So it will appear like this portion of the slab is subducting under the other side of the slab. And now I would score. I like to use a multi-needle scoring tool. This is from Zem, but you can use your regular needle. And again, notice I'm doing this when the slab is flat. I'm not doing it when I have it picked up in my hands. I want to minimize as much handling as possible. And then to score this undercut, I like to pick up the slab like this underneath the fabric, and I can score underneath this way. And so now I will be able to pick them up and form them into cylinders.